if you bet on love, there's no way you'll ever lose. Take a stand, make a stand for what's right. It's always worth the fight. It all means nothing if you don't stand up for something. You can't just talk the talk. You got to walk that walk. Yes, you do. It all means nothing if you don't stand up for something. And I stand up for you, self-respect, dignity. If that's all you got, you gotta see. And without that, you don't have a thing. Rise up, love, lift your hands. I stand with you cause I understand. Ain't here to judge, just to take a stand. The greater plans, the creator's plan. Let's all rise like the day began. Reach out and touch with the Savior's hand. On rock we stand like his native land. Let the ways of love be the ways of man. If you don't stand for something, you can't just talk your talk. You got to walk that walk. Yes, you do. Oh, there's something. If you don't stand up for something, then I'll stand up for you. I stand up for you.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory, glory, glory. Oh, glory, glory. Hands to the heavens, no weapon formed against, yes, glory is destined. Every day women and men become legends. Sins that go against our skin become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all, just ain't specific. One son died, the spirit is revisiting us. True and living in us. This is us. That's why Rosa sat on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it goes down, we woman and man up. They say stay down, and we stand up. Shots be on the ground, the camera panned up. King pointed to the mountaintop, and we ran up. One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, glory, glory, glory. Oh, glory, glory. Now the war is not over. Victory isn't won. But we'll fight on to the finish. Then when it's all done, we'll cry glory. Oh, glory. Oh, Selma is now for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crown in front of a crowd. They march with the torch, we gon' run with it now. Never look back, we done gone hundreds of miles. From dark roads, heroes, to become a hero. Facing the League of justice, his power was the people. Enemy is lethal, a king became regal. Saw the face of Jim Crow under a raw ego. No one can win a war individually. It takes the wisdom of the elders and young people's energy. Welcome to the story we call victory. The coming of the Lord, my eyes have seen the glory. One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Wake up, wake up. You've got the power.
All right. Good evening. Thank everyone for joining us on this Monday evening. Thank you for those of us that are with us here. We've got some great people with us here in the Zoom room on this evening. And thank you for those of you who are joining us on the Facebook live stream for our Kingdom Conversations on tonight. And we're excited about the discussion and the dialogue that's going to take place. And so we welcome you to not only like this on your on the Facebook thread, but to even share this on your Facebook pages so that others might have the benefit of this experience on tonight. Tonight is Kingdom Conversations Part 1, Black Lives Matter versus Black Lives Are Equal. This is the week of Juneteenth, and so our focus, our emphasis on tonight deals with more than 3/5. And if you don't know what we mean by that, you will by the end of this experience, but still less than 5/5. Our presenter, Bishop Dr. Darrell R. Pulley, is with us on tonight. Dr. Pulley, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, Bishop Hector. Good evening, everyone on the Zoom in the Zoom room, our panelists. Good evening to those who are watching us via Facebook Live. Good evening.
Gotta tell you, I said it before, I'll say it again. I'm loving that shirt. It is, yes, it is. It is life, yes. And so we are glad to have you with us on tonight, Dr. Pulley. And Dr. Pulley, for us in Kingdom, it's all about a conversation. It's just all about a conversation. And so you and I, sir, we're having this conversation about Black Lives Matter. And you had some things to say about Black Lives Matter, which really kind of led to us being here tonight, which kind of led to this whole trilogy that we're doing and the panelists. And so with regards to Black Lives Matter, let's just go ahead and kick it off, Dr. Pulley. Let's not waste any time with it. Go ahead and tell us exactly what you think about Black Lives Matter. And I want to encourage those that are watching by Facebook, give us your thoughts, give us your responses, your reactions. We'll share as many comments and questions as we can. And then we've got some panelists that we're going to introduce you to in just a little bit. And they're going to share their responses and reactions. And we're going to talk about this thing on tonight. Black Lives Matter versus Black Lives Are Equal. Dr. Pulley, what's up?
Well, thank you so much. There was something happened for me, and I'm in Florida. I lead a multicultural congregation. I am the leader of Today's Church, presiding prelate Church of Lansing Kingdom, Interfaith Tampa Bay, the Gathering of Pastors. I work with the mayor and the police chief, and I work in a lot of different settings which are diverse. And so I was with some of my colleagues and just talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and what they thought about it. And some of my Caucasian colleagues or white colleagues, they say, yes, Black Lives Matter. And they articulated, they were talking about how passionate they were about it, them participating in the protest and really being horrified by what happened with George Floyd. And they were just really down with the Black Lives Matter movement, asking what they were able to do as whites to be able to support the Black Lives Matter movement. And it just a little whisper from the Holy Spirit. And I said, well, what do you think about Black Lives Are Equal? And they coughed and they cleared their throat and they turned red,
I
and they
can't
needed
turn red, but
water.
yeah.
And they needed water. And so I was wondering, why were you able to say that Black Lives Matter very easily, but then when it say Black lives were equal, that it was a struggle? And I am a metaphysician, I'm a New Thought Christian, I'm a kingdom citizen, and I believe in unity and equality. That's the principles that we are based on. One of the governing principles of the Church of Everlasting Kingdom is unity and equality. And so I believe in that. And I often say that we're all one, we're spiritual beings, we're made in the image and likeness of God, that, that God expresses in various forms. And so therefore, I am for unity, I am for equality. It's seeing us all as God's beloved offspring. But sometimes I'm seeing that when we drill down to say, what does it mean for us to be God's beloved offspring? And to say that we are one regardless of age, gender, race, religion, socioeconomic status, educational level, orientation, criminal background, family dynamic, that when you start breaking down that we're all one and we're all God's beloved offspring, and we start to differentiate what that means and drill down with it, then that's where our prejudice starts to come in. That's where our discrimination starts to come up. And the things in us that are not healed about it, it's not in the generalization of it, but it's when we get very specific about it that things start to come up. And so I talked to them a little further, and I was angry. And I have to admit that I was angry. I was angry about that because they were not able to say equal like they were able to say that Black Lives Matter. And I know these people. I work with these people in various committees. I'm not saying that they were prejudiced. I'm not saying that they're racist, but I'm saying that it was a struggle for them. And so I celebrate the Black Lives Matter movement, but I believe that it needs to go a little bit deeper and come a little bit further so we can get to what the real issue is that people are having problems with, which is Black lives being equal. Black Lives Matter. Some of my, counterparts, their dogs matter, their cats matter, but they don't see them as being equal. They're people who have, if you go back to slavery, the people who were their nannies, the people, they mattered. The people who cleaned the house, the butlers, they mattered, but they were not equal. And so it feels to me that Black Lives Matter in a lot of ways, and I feel it's necessary. And I believe that's one level of consciousness. But I believe we have to keep expanding our consciousness to Black lives are equal, because matter doesn't get to the heart of the matter. We got to go a little bit deeper. And so Black lives are equal really is a higher consciousness. I feel it's a deeper root to get real clear. And so when we talked about slavery, and Juneteenth is coming up, celebrating, the end of slavery when it finally got to everybody, that it's over and everybody is free. And in honor of that we didn't start off as equal. As African Americans, Blacks, Negroes, all that we've been called over the years, colored, we didn't start off as equal. We started off as being 3/5 of a person, that we were not considered equal, that we were 3/5 of a person. And so that means that we have some human qualities, we have some human rights, but we're not fully a person. And I believe that that consciousness continued with us not being fully equal in the civil rights movement with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, got us another fifth. I believe that with the civil rights movement, us being able to eat in any restaurant, us being able to live in any neighborhood, us being able to drive any car and be able to get different jobs and to sit wherever we desire to sit on the bus and not be segregated. I believe that those civil rights got us another fifth. And I believe that we got to 4/5. And I believe that that's where it stopped, that we're at 4/5. And so when you don't see another person as a person, when you depersonalize them and don't see them as your equal, it makes it easier to kill them. It makes it easier to discriminate against them. It makes it easier to be prejudiced because you believe, whether consciously or unconsciously, that they're not equal to you. But when I see you as my equal, then I treat you as my equal. And there's so much injustice as it relates to African Americans, as it relates to earnings, as it relates to positions, as it relates to so many different areas of society where we have not yet gotten that other fifth. And that's what I'm asking for. I desire for us to proclaim we need our other fifth. We need to be equal and not just matter. That while the energy is going on and while we're protesting and while we are outraged, that we need to keep this conversation expanding and let's get to the root of it. Because even with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, the King movement was about equality. That I believe that one day that my children will be able to sit at a table of brotherhood and sisterhood with whites and blacks, will be able to sit together and eat together at a table of brotherhood, where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That if a black person commits a crime, that it's not that it was a black person committing a crime, but there was a crime committed. So because of that character flaw, then they are, they get the just recompense for that. If it was a white person that committed a crime and had a character flaw, that it's not a white person that did it, but they're judged by the character defect that took place in their actions. And so I'm asking us to expand the conversation, to not settle for Black Lives Matter, but to really fight for Black lives are equal, that we're not 3/5 of a person, slavery is over, that we're not just 4/5 of a person with civil rights, but the fight now is for us to be equal, that we are all God's beloved offspring. And this breath of life that is in us is in all of us as God's beloved offspring. But I believe we cannot settle for just mattering, that's in a lot of ways. And I was talking to some of my natural and spiritual sons and daughters, and when they thought of Black Lives Matter, they thought of it being a reaction, meaning don't kill us. That reaction to police brutality. I know the movement, if you read it on the website, it gives a lot more details and a lot more information about it. But just the sound bite that people hear, and I believe the words are so important. I believe the sound bite that people hear is just mattering. But I don't believe that Black lives, when people hear that they really think equal. I think they just think has significance, should not be killed, should be respected in some regard, but not equal. And so I believe until we get to equal, that there is a sense of white supremacy, that there is a sense of white privilege, because it is not that we're all equal. So that's what I'm really holding in my consciousness, that Black lives are equal to white lives, brown lives, all lives are equal, that we're all celebrated as God's beloved offspring, not just tolerated, not just accepted, but celebrated for who we are and how we are expressing. I believe that who we are as God's beloved offspring, and we express as Black, as white, as gay, as straight, as male, as female, as Christian, as Jew. I believe those are all expressions, but at root we are spirit. And so therefore we're all equal, and we ought to be treated equally and to see each other equal. Black lives are equal is a change of perception, that I'm asking you to see me as your equal, to see me as equal to you, to see me as one with you, that we are not separate, but we are one. In Christ, the Bible says there's neither Jew nor Greek, bond nor free, that we're all one in Christ, male or female, that we're all one in Christ. And so that unity and that equality, I believe, is what we have to push and what we have to fight for. Give me my other fifth. I don't just desire to matter, but I desire to be equal. And that's the consciousness I believe that we need to hold in our minds. I believe that's the language that we need to speak out of our mouths. And those are the actions that we need to work, is for us to be equal. Give me my other fifth, 5 out of 5. I'm not 3/5 of a person. I'm not 4/5 of a person, but I am 5/5. I am a whole person, just like everybody else.
Well, all right. Well, you have certainly set the table. You have said a lot. You have said a mouthful.
I shared my heart.
You shared your heart. You shared your heart, and I know that you and I could probably engage in this thing, and go on and on. But we've got some friends with us tonight, and for those of you that are watching, give us your number. Give us a rating based on everything that Dr. Pulley just shared on tonight. on a scale of 1 to 10. 10, Dr. Pulley, I hear you, I understand you, and I agree with you. 1, you ain't right. What is your number based on what Dr. Pulley said? Give us your reaction on the thread. On a 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. And I want to let's just get some. We've got some friends here with us tonight. We've got Katrina Johnson Smith, who's in Baltimore, Maryland, on the East Coast with us tonight. We've got Ramel Parks Weekly in St. Louis with us on tonight. And we've got Sherry James in California. I mean, we got folks from all over with us. I am so excited for all these great people with us on the line tonight. And so before I get started with the Q&A, let's just get some response and reaction from these panelists on tonight. So Katrina, you heard what the man had to say. He wants his 5 fifths. He says we will. Let me not even prompt you. Katrina, what you got to say based on what you heard Dr. Pulley say on tonight?
So I am in agreement with that. And I also want to provide another perspective. And so based on some reading, I'm the person that has been poring over research and really digging into history. Another thing that I saw is that during the Constitutional Convention, that they really, the basis of them assigning the numbers is to create balance. So we know that the southern states, they had more slaves. And so they said, another perspective of that, Dr. Pulley, is if you have 5 slaves, we're only going to count 3. So then to that perspective, there are 2 people that we're not counting, 2 people that are laboring in the field. There are 2 people that are doing all of the work, but we're not going to count them because we don't want an unequal balance to take place between the North and the South. So it really, when you think about everything regarding the 5th, it also boils down to the creation and the system of wealth. That's what I see, really talking about the wealth and how that was created in this movement. And one of the things that I looked at is, what does it mean when I lack something? When I feel as if I'm in lack, then I'm forever searching, for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, if I don't feel like my life is that valued, if I don't feel like I really have the liberty, but what I am going to do is look for the pursuit of happiness. So that means I may find myself looking for and purchasing and doing all of these things because I am in pursuit of something that I don't feel as if I have. So when you said, give me my 5th, or give me a 5th, give me Civil Rights Act of 1964 was great, but there is still something that's missing. It resonated with me because what it's saying is, listen, we all need to understand that when this Declaration of Independence was written, we weren't there. We weren't accounted for in that document. We were property. We weren't seen. And so now we need to be elevated to be seen as the people, as the humans, as the equal people that we're called to be. And I'm going to tag someone else right there.
The equal people. Wow.
The equal people. Yes.
The equal people. The equal people. Romel, talk to us.
Hello, everybody. I'm honored to be on this panel this evening. On the question, well, a couple things. So on the question of the 3/5, so I have a somewhat different perspective on the 3/5 because in looking at the history of it and how it ultimately came about, it was really the South who wanted us to be counted as a whole person. And it was the North who was like, no, that's not going to be a good idea. And so you would think, well, why would the South want us to be counted as a whole person? Sounds to me like they would be the ones that wanted us to be counted as less. Well, they didn't care about their slaves, but they wanted their slaves to count in the population count because they wanted to have the representation, the greater number of representation in Congress in order to further the goals of the South and slavery. And so, in a perfect world, the slave wouldn't have been counted at all, not even 3/5. Why? Because the representatives of the South who were going to be apportioned because of those population numbers were not in any way going to represent the interests of the slaves. So why count them in the population if they're not going to be represented? So, so in terms of that compromise, ideally the slaves wouldn't have been counted at all for that purpose. But I don't think that there's any way not to agree that we're not equal. We're not treated as equal. We're not seen as equal. And that struggle supposedly being enshrined in law, like we talk about the Voting Rights Act, and first of all, we shouldn't even needed the Voting Rights Act if the first number of constitutional amendments after slavery actually mattered, right? So even though equality supposedly is enshrined in law, the challenge is that law does not impact heart.
There you go.
And the challenge is, how do we go from just fighting for a legislative victory, which can only go so far, because even with the Voting Rights Act, we still have voter disenfranchisement. Even with the Voting Rights Act, we still have polling places moving at the last minute and people needing to show certain forms of identification and things. So there are always ways around laws. The question is, how do we get to the heart? And as Dr. Pulley was talking about, having this conversation with his colleagues, white colleagues, honestly, we could pass 1 million laws, and I think that the same people would still have the same problem answering that, because equality is not something that can be legislated. And when I say equality, I mean equality in terms of somebody's heart.
Mm-hmm.
And for, honestly, this probably gonna sound bad when I say this, but if somebody views me as mattering as much as their dog, I don't really care. And the reason that I say that is because I can't change how somebody perceives me. And if I spend a lot of my energy trying to change the heart of a bigot, is what it ultimately boils down to, bigotry. Where am I really going to get in terms of forward progress? How do you actually change those hearts and minds, particularly in the streets? I think that what Dr. Pulley was having was a personal conversation with these people. And to me, that's where the change is more apt to happen, in terms of somebody viewing me as more powerful or more important than their dog, as mattering more than their cat. Because legislatively, it's not changing. Mm-hmm. We've been 100 years after the 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment. We've been 50, 60 years after 1964, after the Civil Rights Movement. And people's hearts are still cold. People still do not care about Black people. And we can pass laws day and night, and they have to be passed. But see, that to me is where I really want to fight. And that's where I understand, at least, and I could be wrong, but that's where at least I understand the idea of Black Lives Matter having its origin, that is dealing with, and he even said it, the response to police brutality and seeking to address the murder of Black people by the power structure, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Police don't kill us.
Police don't kill us, right? And see, those types of things, that can be legislated. That should be legislated. But I don't know if equality in terms of a person's state of mind or a person's state of heart can be, because even if we outlaw, for example, if we outlaw the N-word, I'll still be one in their mind. Mm-hmm. I'll still be one in their heart. Now, my thing is, I still want to outlaw, certain things and get my legal rights. But I try not to speak. Yeah, it absolutely is only a beginning.
But we think because we got it legislated that the victory has been won. But the fight is still on, as you said, until the hearts change, till the minds change. Repentance is a change of mind or a change of heart that results in a change of action. And it has to get to that heart level. And I believe that 1/5, as you said, is really at that heart level.
The only thing, and I'll close with this, the only concern that I would have is, how do we approach, because to me, both of those have to be approached differently. Approaching it legislatively, taking to the streets, pressuring our congressmen, going in for the kill, if you will, to make sure that this stuff happens, is one thing. trying to reach the hearts and minds has to be addressed, I think, in a totally different way. Because I think that the people who aren't on our side are still not on our side, even after we've taken to the streets. If anything, they use they use us going to the streets as more ammunition against us to justify their bigotry. So yeah, it has to be delineated between those two goals and how we ultimately go about accomplishing those goals.
Okay, Sherry, how are you? What you thinking?
I'm good. I'm good.
There's been a lot of dialogue.
So one, I want to just say thank you so much for having me be a part of this panel. Thank you, Bishop Hector. Thank you, Dr. Pulley. It's a joy to be here.
Thank you.
Honor to sit here with Pastor Ramel and Pastor Katrina. I want to offer a perspective that I feel is important, that we become what we do every day. And I think part of what we're seeing with the regression in race politics is the letting up of the foot on the gas. And that the laws that govern our land come out of a state of consciousness. Like, they don't come out of thin air, they come out of a collective consciousness. So I do think that the laws are valuable. And I would imagine that with, Moses, that when the 10 Commandments were laid out, there was probably somebody who still thought that it was okay to commit adultery. That when there was probably somebody who still thought that, well, there are circumstances. Well, you got to understand, I don't like my wife and I like this other girl over here. So I don't think that the goal is to get every heart. I think the goal is collective consciousness, and the collective consciousness establishing policies that work for a majority of the people. So I think that getting those laws passed are important. I think that and recognizing that we may always have a mixed state of consciousness. We may never have a space where everybody believes that Black people are equal, but I don't know that that is the goal. I think what is more important is that we have an effort to deconstruct the idea of inequality in our minds. That you don't have power to stop the results of what's going on in my mind. No one does. So if in my ideal world, in my utopia, we got a team working on the outer things with the laws and other legislation, and we got an inner team working on the mind, working to deconstruct. Because the thing is that that at every step along the way, there's a book that I'm reading now called The Color of Money, and entrepreneurs through Black entrepreneurs through the history of this country, coming out of slavery, have found places where no one was looking and went and created enormous wealth. We see that in the hair care industry, and then later in the music industry, and all these different places. And of course, we see the backlash, which is as soon as there's the opportunity, the whites come in. And I feel like don't let up on the gas as far as finding those opportunities, because once it's settled in your mind, people just have to deal with it. If you decide that, I'm Bishop A. Bernard Hector, you bishop. So, I got to roll with you as you present yourself. So if the idea of inequality is deconstructed in our minds, then the world has to deal with us as we present ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So Katrina, it sounds like, and I've heard so many great things on tonight, it sounds like they can only treat us how we let them. What are you thinking about that?
Well, I want to get to that question, but there is something I wrote down that was such a hot topic almost for me with Pastor Romel. And you said something about they don't care about Black people. And I want to take you guys back to when Hurricane Katrina happened. And Kanye West was on this grand platform standing next to Mike Myers. And if you remember, he said, George Bush does not care about Black people. And the world was stunned. And I believe that was one.
But that ain't what he said, though. Now that ain't what he said. Now, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it. He did not say George Bush does not care about Black people.
Well,
Now,
okay.
what he said was George Bush don't give a D about Black
Yeah,
people.
but I chose that
proceed.
that I chose.
I'm just saying, ma'am. If we go, if we're gonna quote Kanye, we're gonna quote Kanye.
I'm gonna quote the Kanye of the new Jesus Walks, which I'm gonna quote Kanye. You can have old Kanye. I'm gonna quote the new.
Okay, go ahead.
It was shock. If you guys remember, it was everybody's reaction that I was around in Texas at the time, and it started a conversation about, does he? How do we know? What's in place? Let's look at our communities. Do we see that care, and do we see the fact that people care about us? How is that represented? And so we're having those same conversations now. It's almost like a literal face-off, from every decade. Here we are 10 years later, having another conversation about, do we care about ourselves? Do we know and understand our worth? And as you talked about the wealth, I wrote down in my notes earlier that we are the wealth. I believe that African-American people, Black people of color, we are the wealth system. That when they looked at slaves, they received their money based on the number of slaves that they had. That's how they constructed their wealth. We are a wealth of talent and resources and ability. So I believe that we are the wealth system. And then we begin to let wealth be established through our hands and through our expressions and what we do. Go ahead.
So I feel like we have to see ourselves that way. Mm-hmm. And when I say see ourselves that way, that there's a way that you show up when you know that what you are bringing to the table is of value. That in the story of Jacob and Laban, when Jacob goes to Laban and basically he's tricked into marrying Leah, and then he works another 7 years for Rachel, he goes to Laban to demand his freedom. And in doing the research, one of the things that we find is that he asked for the speckled and the spotted goats. Well, it turns out in the Mesopotamian / African culture that the goats that were brown or that were speckled or that were spotted or whatever, that indicated prosperity. So he wasn't going to Laban demanding the least of Laban's flock. He was going demanding the best. That he recognized that, wait a minute, when I got here, you weren't that prosperous. But because of what I've been able to do, because of how I've been able to take care of the land, I am asking for the best of what I'm asking for my percentage. I'm asking for my royalties. And so there's it's I know my worth. And so I think that we must get to the place where we know our worth. Now, will that be a bloodless letting go? I don't know. But I think that there is no freedom until we say, this is what I'm worth. This is what this is what I demand. Change the housing laws. Change them. Put the same protections that you have put in terms of valuations in white neighborhoods, put them in my neighborhoods. And guess what? I'm gonna show up on your doorstep every Monday morning with my rally crew until you change these laws. Like these things don't come out of a vacuum, they come out of a consciousness. And then once we know, it is to insist that this is what I require. I insist on in fact, forget that, you owe me 7/5. So you need to make up for all that past time. I don't want to be whole. I want to be brought up to where I belong.
I love that. I love that idea of seeing our own intrinsic value and our own intrinsic worth, because, I'm a metaphysician. I believe that people they reflect how we see ourselves. And so the question is that matters, I believe, open the door for us to have a conversation of equality. And I believe that once the door has been opened, now that the door is open and people that don't look like us are asking, what can I do? What can I do? Let's talk about equality. Let's get real clear and specific about. So matter opens the door and equality is the conversation. And I did want to say something about Pastor Ramel's comment, is that you cannot legislate people's heart. I believe the conversations is what's going to change the heart. I believe the relationship, the rapport, the education is what we can do to change hearts. But I believe, as it says, the legislation is a whole different issue. And I believe both of them need to exist simultaneously, that we're networking, we're team working, and we're collaboration, we're partnership. And some people are going to be there working on the legislation part, but some people are going to be working on the heart part. And what we are dealing with in this conversation, I believe, is dealing with addressing, having these conversations with people as the door has been open. I believe the door is wide open. People are listening like this, saying, okay, what y'all saying? What y'all saying? And now that their ears are attuned and their eyes are open, let's not settle just for mattering, and let's talk about equality and making up, as Reverend Sherry said, making up for lost time. And let's restore the years that the locust and the cankerworm and the palmer have eaten. Let's get all of our stuff, but we got to see ourselves as valuable. And it's only in us seeing ourselves as valuable that we're going to be able to take the door open of Black Lives Matter and really have the conversation of Black Lives are equal and what that looks like.
What's up, Sherry?
So, I'm chomping at the bit. So I feel like let's not stop the people that are running with the Black Lives Matter conversation. But I feel like those of us in the spiritual community, we need to have a conversation with the Black lives are matter to us. And I don't think that it is just, oh, stop killing each other in the street, which is where people literally sink to when they start, kind of giving their reasons for why all lives matter. I think that it is incumbent on us who understand that you can't give me what I don't have capacity to receive. And so I feel like in the spiritual community that what we must be about is the expansion of the capacity of our community. So, for example, when I have worked with nonprofit organizations like Oxfam or Doctors Without Borders or other Heifer International, one of the things that I learned through that when they go into different communities, they can't just come in with cash. That when they flood the country with resources, they actually break the economies in the country because there's no capacity to absorb what is being given. And so I feel like the urgency on us, those of us in this, New Thought, metaphysical, Metacostal, whatever group, that we need a sense of urgency in terms of expanding the capacity, because you all know you got some cousins that if you can get them $50 today and you need to give them $50 tomorrow. And if you haven't taught them how to generate their own $50, they will keep coming back to you for that same $50 because the capacity is not there to generate any more. And so I think we need to get up off of our affirmations, get in the community and start having real conversations about here's how money works. Here is how you create generational wealth. Stop getting your joy from clothes you put on your back. Start getting your joy from numbers growing in your bank account. Here's where you need to be having your investments. Stop getting things on debt. Begin to build a cash reserve. Pool resources with your family or with your neighbors or whomever is in your social circle. Educate yourself financially every day. I feel like it's on us. And if we're not doing that, we're not doing our jobs. So I don't want to stop Tamika Mallory and all my sisters out there that are running with the Black Lives Matter. Have that conversation. But the work that we need to do is, come on, y'all, let's expand this capacity. Let me talk to you about this debt that you keep carrying year after year.
And I was having a conversation with a person today that was telling me that everything associated with Black is negative. And the young lady was saying that her daughter wanted to be white, and because of the things that were happening and how the Wicked Witch was Black and how it was a Black witch, and that everything associated with Black was negative, and that's kind of in the subconscious of Black people and the subconscious of white people and brown people, that there is something that's less than, there's something evil, there's something bad about Black. And I said, I don't believe that, because once you start talking about all, you lying. And so I said, I don't believe that everything associated with Black is negative. And when Reverend Sherry talked about the wealth, it reminded me that every time you talk about a business being successful, it's in the Black. Every time you talk about a business being prosperous, it's in the Black. Every time you talk about a business that is meeting their goals and exceeding those goals, where their income is exceeding their expenses, it's in the black. So don't tell me that everything that has to do with black is negative when every business person has to talk about being in the black and looking at those numbers every single solitary day. But if we buy into this conscious, well, everything, they try to make everything about black is negative. If we buy into those lies, then we will always see ourselves as less than. And we will not really matter the way we need to matter and be equal the way that we are, because we've got to start finding the positive and building off of that. That everything about black is not negative, that black is beautiful, black is prosperous, black represents wealth, black represents success. And so to highlight that, to focus on that which is good and build off of that conversation, as opposed to just focusing on that which is negative, is where we need to move. We need to shift, we need to change so that we can really manifest this equality.
I hear you, and I hear you saying shift. I hear you saying change. I hear the talk of the collective consciousness. I hear the talk about get up off your, and God knows I thought she was gonna say it. You get up off your affirmations. I was like, you better come on in here. You better come on in here. But you get up off your affirmations. Get up off of that.
That's tweetable. Yes. That's Facebookable. That's Instagrammable. That is Snapchatable. Get up off your affirmation.
Get up, or you better get up off your. If you don't get up off your affirmation up in here, okay. So we talk, and I'm reading the thread, and the thread is hot tonight. And we thank you for your comments. So we're talking about wanting to be an equal people, okay? But with regards to being an equal people, and saying get up, get up. We want the rights to get up off of our neck, but in the midst of the movement, they're watching us offend one another. In the midst of being upset and outraged about the knee on George Floyd's neck, we then see blacks going after and assaulting a transgendered person right in the midst of this movement. So Ramel, how do we come out of our, when you talk about get up off your affirmation, how do we come out of our mouths and say, treat us as equal? We're not treating ourselves as equal.
Okay, so a couple things. Number one, we are not the power structure in the United States. And so I don't want whatever is going on internally within the marginalized group of African Americans to be used as the standard and justification for how the legal power structures you. So whatever's going on in the black community, that does not excuse power structure's ability to oppress. Often it's almost. I used the example a few weeks ago in a conversation with someone. If there's a spouse who's being beat by their partner, and I walk up to the partner who's being beat, or who has a history of being beaten, and I punch them in the face. When the police come, I can't. Well, their spouse hit them more than I did, so why should it matter what I did? That doesn't. Whatever's going on over there doesn't excuse what. So, whereas I understand the question, I think there's importance to the question. I also don't want the question to distract or to excuse what's going on. We don't have to wait. America is not supposed to wait until the black community gets their own together before righting its own wrongs toward the black community. I think that's been an excuse that they have been using, even when talking about, black people being shot by the police, and their answer is, well, look at black on black crime, not, ignoring the fact that everybody kills their own people in greater numbers because that's who they're usually in close contact with. It's used as an excuse. We're not the power structure, so deal with that. But I also think that
isn't that like Mama saying, "Do as I say and not as I do"?
No, I don't think so. Because number one, so for example, think about Pookie on the corner shooting Ray Ray, and think about Officer O'Donnell shooting Ray Ray. Pookie on the corner, if he gets caught, is going to prison. Officer O'Donnell's going to be on paid administrative leave for 2 weeks and then give him back his job. The people didn't pay for Ray Ray's gun. The people paid for Officer O'Donnell's gun and gave him a badge, entrusted him with authority, and sent him out there to do what he does. So I think that there's a false equivalence in comparing the actions of a marginalized, watch this now, a marginalized communities whose actions, whose negative actions within the
Our
community can be
reflections.
traced back to how
Yes.
we've been treated in this country. That have created the pathology where, as Sister Sherry was talking about, where there's a lack of value within our own minds and hearts toward our own selves. That can be, we weren't born with that. We were taught that by how the United States has treated us for generations. And so then you can't cut our leg off and then point out the fact that we're not running. It's shooting the gun and then hiding it, behind the back.
I feel like what you said was so well said. It is that you are looking for a reason to justify state-sanctioned murder.
Yes.
It's a distraction. It's a distraction.
It's a distraction. Your job is to safely guard the community, not to safely guard some communities and then smash and kill and burn others.
It's
And let me say this. Let me say
okay
this.
for us to smash and kill it ourselves. Now, understand the role of the
White
moderator.
folks are smashing and killing their stuff.
Now, understand the role.
People with aberrant frames of mind smash and kill. We don't kill, smash, and burn more than anybody else. You can look at
that.
And the thing is that it's like, no, I saw this from Sean King and I thought it was so brilliant. There's no song called F the Police Department. Because guess what? The fire department, because the fire department does their job.
Right.
Now, listen, I want everybody to be clear, panelists, that the role of the moderator is to represent the voice of the people. So
we got it.
I'm just the mouth. I'm the mouth of the thread. So
But let me say this.
Well, we need to get the thread together. Okay.
Come on. Let's.
But let me say this.
The concern is it fair for us to talk about white on white? And it's hot on the thread.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is fair. It is fair.
Okay.
It is fair. It's very fair because that's a distraction. It's like I can't help this, so I'm gonna just say it. I got a thread today that said the U.S. Supreme Court voted that same gender loving people, a person because of their orientation cannot be fired from their job. And even though there's prejudice amongst the gay community, the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender community, they didn't say, well, until y'all get yourselves together, that we're not gonna make no changes once y'all stop discriminating between tops and bottoms and sides and femmes and mass. They didn't do that. They kept the agenda that y'all go change these laws. And I feel like every time we get a momentum that we get distracted by this or we killing ourselves. And that's a distraction. We can't, yes, that is happening, and we need to make some changes.
And that's honestly
within and without.
That's exactly why I don't.
So what are you saying is that yes, adultery is taking place in the church, but holiness is still right.
It's still right. And we're not gonna wait till it stops.
It's
We're
still
not
the
waiting
standard.
for anything. We're not waiting for anything. Let's do it.
And that's why I don't want to spend too much, because let's be honest, we're human beings and we only have so much time and we only have so much energy. So I don't want to spend too much of our communal energy on trying to change a white mind that's already made up in its mind that I'm not worth more than a dog. If that's what you think, then you go ahead and think. Let the foolish be foolish still. Let whatever. The thing is, I want to fight for the legislation, get the rights changed, and then as Sherry so masterfully pointed out, then we got to do our own work internally. And you referenced the LGBT community, and I think that's very important because as even an analogy to this, because you can spend time fighting legislatively for the right to marry and for the right to not be fired from your job and for the right to not be have housing discrimination. But if you spend all of your effort trying to convince people to accept you as a gay person, it's a losing battle. Some people are just going to believe what they believe about homosexuality, and you just need to move on and live your life. And so a lot of the work has to be done not to try to get straight people to affirm LGBT people, but to just get straight people to stop discriminating legally against them, and then to help the LGBT community to affirm themselves. And I think
this conversation
applies to the Black community. We can't fight the fight of legislation, fight the fight of don't kill me in these streets, police officers, but spend that energy, spend that time working on building, as she was saying, building our own selves up, getting our own mind right, so that we can have an honor and a reverence for our own divinity, and not spending so much time trying to convince a bigot not to be bigoted.
But this conversation started not because these people identified, my colleagues identified themselves as bigots. They would be hurt, they would be offended, they would cry if they were seen, oh no, I'm not, but it wasn't until I said that Black lives are equal that it even came up in their awareness that there is some prejudice, that there is some discrimination, that there are some isms and schisms going on. And so I'm saying there's some people who desire to be healed, but they don't even know they're sick. There's some people who desire to come up, but they don't even know that they're not even aware until we start having these conversations. So I don't desire, if you don't like me and you hate me and you want to kill me, I want to know that. But I don't want you smiling, grinning, laughing in my face and you my friend and I'm eating at your house and you don't think that we're equal. I need us to work on that if we're going to have a friendship, if we're going to be working on the same board and the same committee, if I'm going to be the president of this organization. I need those conversations to be had and I need that healing to happen, as opposed to us just saying I got Black friends and I voted for Obama. None of those things mean that you really believe that Black people and white people are equal, not just tolerated, not just accepted, but that we ought to be celebrated because we are equal. And so I think that we're hiding under some things and not really getting to the real root. And I think when we have these conversations, it brings up where people are not healed, where we're not healed, where they're not healed, and things come up and out because they need to be healed. And that's why I started this conversation, is because these people, they thought they were fine.
They thought we were
So
fine.
there's a word.
Katrina, I see you off of mute. What you want to say?
Okay. There's a word, exposure. So
Yes.
we remember back in the day, right, before we had the instant cameras, you had to wait, your camera had to go, the film had to go into a dark room before, and there were exposures that had to happen. And so with the advancements of technology, it is recreating exposure. So yes, what happened in Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Act and all of that, that exposed what was happening during that time. But here we are in 2020, and it is taking the the Sandra Bland's, it's taking the George Floyd's to begin to expose the threats, the very real threats that are happening in our communities. And as they are getting exposed, this is the time, as we said, as Reverend Sherry said, to have the conversations internally and externally. Let's work on what has to happen in your mind. Where do you see yourself? How do you see yourself? How do you value yourself? And begin to have those conversations with our congregations, with our centers and our people that we can influence, and then begin to let the exposure begin to go out to the greater communities that we're called in. But absolutely, I believe that this exposure was necessary, and that the more things are exposed, the more we'll begin to see laws and equalities and things begin to shift, because as we're exposing it, we're addressing that.
But I feel like with this exposure thing, and this is where I was angry. I was not just angry, and I know I'm gonna get flack for this, but I got broad shoulders, I'm gonna take it. I was angry that we as a people have settled for filming stuff and putting it on Facebook. That when I looked at the killing of George Floyd, that there were so many different angles of people with their cameras that were filming it. And that made me angry, not just with the officer that had his knee on his neck, but also with the officers that stood by, and also with the people who watched. I don't feel like the police officer who had his knee on his neck was the only person that killed George Floyd. I feel like we all did. The ones that stood by and watched, the one that just filmed it on camera. Why were other people not maimed? Why were other people not harmed? Why would there's not a distraction long enough to lift his knee off? Why was there not something done besides us just watching it? And I feel like when it comes to this, when it came to the civil rights movement, that people were willing to put their lives on the line for a bigger purpose and a higher plan. I will go to jail. I will lose my job. I will take the dog bites. I'll be hosed. I will be spit on. I will be beat. I will be killed. I will do whatever necessary. And I believe that we got to get that type of energy in this movement, as opposed to we are just reacting and then we're protesting and we're carrying signs and it's all safe. But to get done what needs to happen, until we find something worth dying for, that life is not worth living. And I believe that when we really believe that this really matters and it's really important, that it won't be just that we watch it and filmed it and say, oh my God, this is horrible, now let's march about it. But in the moment, while we're filming, while we're watching, that we will do something about it. And I was angry about that. And I was angry that, and I'm still feeling, I talk about it and I feel angry again, that we're not, I don't feel like in the moment, what are we doing in the moment besides watching and filming? And I feel like to really heal all of this, there is a healing that happened. Slavery just didn't happen because white people came over and just took our land. There had to be something on our part as Africans that allowed that to happen. There had to be something on our part. And I think that we got to take responsibility for that. And I think that the white people need to take responsibility for their part, and we got to take responsibility for our part. We can't start in the middle of the story with slavery, but how did they get there? How did we let them do that? How did that happen? How are we letting these things happen as a people? I believe to heal this, everybody's got to own their part and take responsibility, or we'll never get healing as long as it's somebody else's fault and we're the victim and somebody did this to us and somebody did that to us. I believe that we'll never get to a part of healing. But when we own our part and you own your part, I believe then the healing can really happen.
Sherry.
I think that would be really nice, if we could all just get to our part, right? I think that would be wonderful. But I feel like I want to say something in regards to the exposure, because I actually don't believe that the white people don't know that this is going on. That would be like saying that the cops are in some kind of vacuum and they're not going home to their wives. They're not going to family reunions. And just like you talk about what's going on your job, I bet they talk about what's going on their job. So I don't buy that idea. I think what happened with
What idea don't you buy, Sherry?
this idea that the majority of white people don't know what's going on.
Okay.
There was and I cannot call her last name right now, but this white woman, her name is Jane
Elliott.
She does. Say it again.
Is it Jane Elliott?
Yes, Jane Elliott.
Go ahead, Katrina. Katrina got them flags.
Yes. She asked a question of a group of whites in an audience. She said, "Would you want to be a black person?"
Mm-hmm.
And she said multiple times. And then she said, "Your silence tells me two things. One, you don't want to be it, but two, you know what's going on." And so there is a false narrative that they don't know what is
saying is that not only does she know she don't want to be it, but she also knows why she don't want to be it.
Exactly. Just like Amy Cooper in New York City knew that I could call on the phone, and she took a chance, and went into her whole white girl, whatever. So this idea that you don't know that it's going on, I call BS, right? What I'm saying is that you absolutely do know, and the gig is up. And what happened with George Floyd, and I wish that it didn't cost his life in order to show it, but that I wish that it didn't cost his life to show it, but it happened in a season where nobody could look away. But people have been looking away for years, for decades. And now we're at a place where no one can look away. And so in some, I don't know, divine design way, perhaps it needed to go this way so that you could stop pretending like you don't actually know what's going on. Because who do you think these white policemen going home to? They're not going home to black wives. They're going home to white wives. So that means their white wives know what's going on. You don't think they debrief on the pillow like you debrief on the pillow? So this idea that you didn't know that it was happening, no, 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 no. I don't buy that.
So what do we do? And this is to anyone, and again, the moderator is the representation of the voices of the thread. What do
We gotta get that thread together.
Let's sew some suits and dresses with that thread.
What do we do then when we say white people? Are we doing the same thing? Are we generalizing, just like when they say, you know, Black people, as if it's all of us, depending on the scenario, the circumstance? How do we delineate? How do we differentiate? How do we tell the difference between which white people, or do we just throw them all in together and it's just white people?
I would like to, let me just jump in on that. Yes, that is generalizing. However,
we got a crew tonight.
Is that right there with House forever?
I want to acknowledge it is to say white, because it is, you know, I have white people who I believe are committed to Black equality, who are committed to Black Lives Mattering, and want to see the systems of oppression toppled. So to say white people, that does paint with a broad brush. However, the white people who are committed to ending oppression already know that they're not included when we say white people. They already know. So could we be more precise? We should. But I'm gonna tell you, sometimes it takes so much energy because you're already angry, you're already frustrated, you're already trying to address something that is so deeply rooted in your heart. To take all the energy to not step on a sensitive white person's toes by saying white people, it requires a lot. I'm not saying we shouldn't make the effort. Personally, I have given to using a new term. One of the reasons is to avoid the overgeneralization. I have started I'll do it in 10 minutes. I have started using the term whiteness. Because to me, whiteness doesn't just describe the people, but it describes the system that uplifts those people. And I think that that's one of the ways that, because even when people say racist in their head, they have so distanced themselves psychologically from the idea of, I'm not racist. No, but you're still.
So use whiteness in a sentence. How would you use that in a sentence practically?
Is it a noun or a verb? Or
yes, use it for us.
Yes. It's all of those things. So people don't think they're racist, but they love to uphold whiteness, or whiteness is a cancer in the church, something like that. It's more so a noun, but it describes the systems of oppression that is not associated with the term racist, that causes people to wash their hands and say, that's not me. But you're still involved, you're still smeared by the system of whiteness. So perhaps maybe from changing from white to whiteness, but I still think that it's important not to be so general that we're not identifying, we are talking about white power structures. If I just generically say the American power structure, that's not good enough.
It's not, you got to drill down. You got to drill down.
Because let's be honest, there are Black people who are supporters of whiteness as well, even though they're not.
Amen. Amen.
So whiteness is a description of a system that needs to be addressed, but it still identifies who that system props up without categorizing it as all white people.
Absolutely. I like that, whiteness. Like the sounds of blackness, whiteness. I got you.
You're thinking of blackish, whiteness. It absolutely does alter.
What are the people saying on the thread? What are they saying?
They saying too much.
The thread is popping. The thread is absolutely popping. But okay, so one thing the thread is popping with, Dr. Pulley, you talked about, Katrina brought up the exposure, the concept of exposure. And Dr. Pulley, you talked about the offense of people being satisfied with exposure, but nobody willing to be that Samaritan that would put themselves on the line. So someone said, well, you have to understand, these people have family to go home to. Somebody said George Floyd had a family to go home to.
And Martin Luther King had a family to go home to. And so did all those other people in the civil rights movement. that gave their lives so that we could have the civil rights that we have, even though we don't yet have equal rights. They gave their lives for those civil rights. And
All
so
right.
how important really is it?
All right. So then, okay. So, Dr. Pulley, what would you do had you been there? Were you there?
What I'm saying is that in any setting, I'm not.
Dr. Pulley, what would you do if you were there?
I'm getting ready to say it. As a person, I am not a voyeur. I get nothing out of watching. It does nothing for me. I am an active person. In the moment, I will respond, I will act, I will do something. I've been in situations where
Baby, y'all learned something about the bishop tonight.
nobody else moved, but I can't just sit and watch and do nothing and then go home and talk about what that I can't. I gotta do it. I gotta say something. I gotta yell. I gotta push. I gotta do something, but I can't go home and go to sleep knowing that I just watched this happen and I felt powerless, that I couldn't do nothing because you're a police officer, because you got a gun, that I can't do nothing. I'm just, oh my God, who am I against a police officer with a gun? They have more of us than there are of them. What do you mean? They can't kill everybody at one time. They can't shoot everybody at one time. But what I can't do, even if it doesn't do much, I got to do something. Faith without works is dead. We got to do something as opposed to just watching. I can't do it. I will do something. I will grab somebody's leg. I will throw something. I got to do something that distracts long enough for us to do. I got to mobilize people. 9 minutes is a long time. I got to mobilize people. You get the camera. You get them over here. It's just like with people in a bank robbery. When everybody is on the floor and the bank robbers are there and they got guns, somebody says, this is what we're going to do. And there's a plan to do something as opposed to just lay here and die and let this happen.
Patrice,
I can't, I won't, I shall not, and I shan't.
Right.
Someone
You mentioned the word mobilize.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, my apologies. Someone on the thread said spoken by someone who was not there.
Sherry is hot with this thread tonight. She is there with the thread. Sherry, I got the thread. Don't even, you come off the thread. Because I saw you on there with your
got my blood pressure up. Okay.
Katrina, go ahead. What you got?
So you talked about mobilize. And that's the one thing as I was writing, the one thing that we can identify with the movement with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was the numbers. The strength of numbers and the power of mobilization. And we have seen that when it's there, it's in action. I watched on the news today, there was a young lady who was apprehended in a protest, and the entire group of protesters stood in front of the vehicle and said, let this young lady out, let her out of the vehicle. And they opened the door, they let her out, and they stood around her and said, we weren't going to let them take you. We weren't going to let this happen to you.
Absolutely.
But the key thing there was the numbers and the strength. And so when you said instantly, well, you get an assignment, you get a task. I sound like Oprah a little bit, right?
I'm apostolic by nature. I got to put a plan together. I can't.
But
I
that
can't
is
just
the
sit and
number
watch.
of people. And so,
Right.
I think that's also, we have to remember the strength that happens in numbers. Go ahead.
So what I hear you all saying is that it's time for us to stop being shocked. Like by now, we can no longer be shocked by racism. By now, we've seen enough Black lives die at the hand of racist police officers that we should no longer be paralyzed by this, and we should now be in a state of action. Is that what I hear you all saying?
Can I add one more?
We got to do something.
Yeah.
I would like to. I don't think that people filming it and live streaming it on Facebook is a form of voyeurism. I think that is actually a form of action. And I think that we have to be very careful not to delegitimize people's contribution to trying to bring about change, because we wouldn't have the protests and the riots that we had that not been streamed. I think
we need some people streaming, but we don't need everybody streaming.
In Libya, who had an uprising that had a result that was a result of online mobilization. So people contribute in different ways, and everybody's contribution is not necessarily going to look the same. And I will also just say, in terms of being present in how you would respond in a situation like that, I want to be very careful not to in any way seem to place blame on those who are watching power engage power. That in some ways, that they're in some ways responsible, even if not fully, but in some ways even partially responsible for what happened to George Floyd, because they were present and allowed it to happen. One thing that I would say is there is something to be said about the Black Panthers. There is something to be said about us arming ourselves. But to ask somebody who's walking to the store to get some milk, who happens upon the scene, to jump in that scene, you know, we would love to say, yeah, let's do that. We're militant. Let's make it happen. But I'm not going to blame somebody for being present and not taking that action. Now, if you would, hats off. But I want to be very careful that it doesn't appear that in some way we're putting some of the burden on those who were witnesses to this atrocity, and not wholly and squarely on the shoulders of those who carried it out.
And I believe that we're different people and everybody has a different assignment. And I believe that it is some people's assignment to record the revolution. But I believe that that can be everybody's assignment, that there's some of us that have to do something, that some people have to be passionate enough to risk their lives to make. It's like people do it. It's like when you see somebody drowning in the water, there's an intrinsic response where that person is not even thinking at that moment about their own life, but that I just got to save this one. And I'm saying, can more of that rise? I'm not trying to make nobody feel bad, no judgment, no condemnation, but I just want to speak to us not being content with just that, to say, what else can I do? What more can I do? Can we be more active? What can we do in the midst of this? And those examples like Katrina, those examples like Katrina gave are more of the examples I'm calling for, of us to do something actively and passionately in the moment, as opposed to as an afterthought.
Jerry?
Yeah, so you asked about action, and I wanted to respond to that. I again go back to those of us in these kinds of communities, the metaphysical, the New Thought, Metacostal, all of whatever, however you label
Kingdom. Okay, in the kingdom,
all y'all in the
kingdom,
all y'all who believe in the divine nature of all people. I'm talking to you.
Yes.
I feel like our work is on expanding the capacity of the people, because one of the things that we're aware of is that I want to be considered equal. I want to be treated equally, and I want my equal share of the resources of this world. But that's a consciousness that must be developed. And those of us who understand that we become what we do every day must begin the painstaking work of working with people and teaching them how to have. And I feel like that work is as important as the work that's being done by our sisters and brothers that are on the front lines with Black Lives Matter. Because what they are working for, I want us to have the capacity to receive the largesse that is coming. And I believe that you get what you prepare for. And so if we start getting people ready for the reparations that must come, that is part of it, of establishing that consciousness to receive.
Now I want to, because I'm going to jump on the Sherry boat. We got to get this thread together. Now I'm going to take my moderator hat off just for a minute and become a panelist for just 5 seconds. Baby, to the one who says, I don't believe in Black Lives Matter, I believe in human lives matter. I want you to be clear that until Black Lives matter, human lives cannot matter. So I got to make that distinction very quickly. And we're back. All right. So
because and what I'm saying is, and people, when I'm preaching, I say, no matter age, race, gender, religion, orientation, it's only in those delineations of hitting all these different things that we really hit where the pain is. It's like, let's hit where the pain is so we can heal it. But just in the generalization of all lives and all people, that doesn't bring up the isms and schisms that need to be healed. It's when you say the specific words that people have to really deal with the idea of where we, and let me say, I believe that all of us have some form of prejudice. All of us have experienced and have discriminated against people. But I believe it needs to be healed. And if things come up and out, to be healed. But as long as we pretend, oh no, not me, I don't have any, racism, I don't have
Not
any
a racist bone in my body.
homophobia, I don't have any religious, bias. As long as we are telling ourselves these lies, they will never be healed.
Yeah, I mean, so it again, it is that word consciousness. Yes, and yes, and we heard you the first time, the second time, the third time. Yes, consciousness, and as Reverend Sherry said, extending, expanding the capacity or the consciousness of the people to get to that collective consciousness. And so one of the questions on the thread is, what's the plan? And so my question tonight is to this group of panelists: are we able to, beyond just another conversation, beyond just another platform, another discussion, are we able to come together at the table to develop next steps, to develop that plan? What are we going to do? I think is what the people are asking. What are we going to do to, because it sounds great verbally, but what is our action plan, or are we able to put together an action plan?
And let me say, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to increase my influence. And I'm where all the places and spaces where I am, where I lead, where I have influence, I'm going to speak up and speak out and make this whiteness. I love that term, Pastor Mel. The whiteness, I got to speak up about it. I got to say something about it. I got to help bring people's awareness. I believe that we all have influence. We all have some measure or level of influence. To use our measure of influence to increase awareness, to have these conversations, and to let healing begin. So my first thing is to impact every area where I have influence. I have influence with my kids. I have influence with my church. I have influence in these organizations that I lead in my community. I have influence with the mayor, the police chief. Everywhere that I have influence, I'm using that influence to bring about change, to have these conversations, to set these demands.
Okay, so all right, to the panel. So Dr. Pulley has given us his view of isolated impact. Now, what can we do? That's what we can do if each of us individually, I believe we can each do that. And if each of us does that, then it will have collective impact.
So let me give you an example. So when I did the prayer in our city for we had a citywide prayer for this, and I was asked to do the prayer. The police chief could not hear the protester, and the protester could not hear the police chief. And so they're going back and forth, and they could not hear each other. And so me as a pastor with the protester and the police, all my P's, is that I was there to be able to say, this is what I hear you saying, this is what I hear you saying. Can we reach in the middle and do this? The protester was complaining that the police officers would not all get on the ground and put their hands behind their back or take a knee, and that you're not really with us because you won't do what it is that we desire for you to do. And the police was saying, well, if everybody lays on the ground and put their hands behind their back, or everybody takes a knee, then how can we protect everybody? And so I was able to hear what the protester desired and to hear what the police were saying and say, okay, let's do this. Can we have all the police officers that desire to participate? Can they take turns? Okay, you take your knee and you watch. You take your knee. And so we still got all the police officers participating, but it wasn't at the same time. So I believe that we can be in these spaces where we can help people to have these conversations, to get, so that way the protester got what they wanted, the police officers joined them in solidarity, and the police officers got what they wanted with the safety. And so I was able to mediate and negotiate so they could hear each other. Sometimes with the anger, people can't even hear each other. And there is a solution in the midst of this, but somebody has to not be on the side of the protester and not be on the side of the police and be able to see a higher perspective of how we're really one in trying to say the same thing and do the same thing, but there's a way it's possible for it to happen. So I see that as my role. That's what I do. That's what I'm doing. That's what I will continue to do.
And I hear you, Dr. Pauly, and we have absolute respect for that. But again, you are also the one that would run up on the police.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So right now,
Absolutely.
and so that's awesome. So I'm trying to be the voice for individuals that are not that leader, but they want to play a part. And so what I'm trying to get to is that collective consciousness where everybody can have a role of some type, even if it's not the, and we get it, you're the leader. So maybe this might be for one of the panelists. What is it that we can do? What is it that we can put together? Be it next steps, be it action plan, so something that where everybody, like in church, we say, all right, it's offering time. Here's the part of the service where everybody can play a part, right? Because everybody can't preach the sermon. That's you, Dr. Pauly. But what is it we can do? What can we put together where everybody can play a part? And so, do we have a panelist that has a thought?
So let me give, everybody can write a letter to their congressperson and say, these are the differences that we desire to happen. Everybody can do that.
Yeah. So I believe that people have to play their position and play in their zone of genius. And my zone of genius is in helping people move past emotional barriers that keep them from their good, that help people to heal ancestral wounds, to help people heal generational wounds that are keeping them from having the kind of wealth and joy and happiness that they desire in their lives. And so what I see as a collective, because again, what I wouldn't want to see happen, let me see, reparations are due. You need to pay them, period. And they shouldn't be held up for anything. But the last thing that I want to see happen is resources flood into the community and there is no capacity to absorb them. And so as fast as they come in, they turn around and go back out. That I believe that there is a role that we play in our community, that those of us that understand how consciousness is built, that recognize that our consciousness is embodied through our habits, to begin to do the work with our people to develop the consciousness to have the kinds of lives. Because really what we want is that we want to live free. We want to live free, that we want to live free. We want to be happy. We want to have the freedom to pursue the joy and the things that make us happy. And part of that is getting your knee off my neck, but there's also my knee on my own neck in terms of my habits and how I show up in the world. And so those of us that understand how consciousness is built, it is on us to work with a sense of urgency. I may not be trying to get you to a heaven after life, but I am trying to get you to your best life. And so I must work with the same urgency as the person that's trying to keep you from the burning hellfire.
All right. Ramel, what's next?
I certainly echo what my sister Sherry was saying. I believe very strongly in personal development and in empowerment that is drawn from within and not expecting it or waiting on it to come from without. Honestly, I do believe that Black people need to be armed. I think that's a very practical thing that many people who may feel comfortable being armed should go out and get armed.
We got 2 minutes left and you're going to bring that up. Come on.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. And I say that as a faith leader, as a pastor.
No, I'm just saying we don't have time to really explore it like I would love for us to be able to explore it. No. You're fine with what you said.
Just ask the founding fathers. They understood what it meant to be armed and get freedom on the basis of being armed. I think that there's something to be said about that. But but personal development and I love how she put that, Sister Sherry put that about, and I may not even say it right, but basically doing what you do best.
The zone
and
of
genius. That doing what you do best. Well, how did you put it?
Trending on the thread right now, the zone of genius.
That's it. Yes, absolutely. And I think that that's powerful because one of the things that I don't like is that I think that we hold each other back too much by delegitimizing one another's efforts because those efforts don't look like the effort we would put forth. I think that if we let everybody be great in their own way and celebrate their own contributions, whatever that looks like, we would be able to move forward because we're not all going to contribute the same way. Neither do we have to, and neither should we. because only when we each play the individualized part that we can play do all the holes get plugged. So yeah, I think that elevating and lifting people up internally is going to be one of our strongest paths forward.
Katrina, what's next?
So I'm just going to build on top of the sandwich that is so greatly prepared.
You got some lettuce. You got some lettuce for us.
I'm
A little mayonnaise.
Just a little sprinkle. Is that I was reminded, Reverend Sherry, really, you said something and it struck me. And I remember that the church was not just a place to come and worship God and to celebrate, but it was also a place where people received education. It was a place where people were received training and specialized training. And so I am preparing, centers and movements that begin to encompass the whole person and to reach them individually in the areas that they are, so they can all rise and grow to the place where they can be their best selves, and that may start with taking a survey of where are you physically, spiritually, emotionally, financially, organizationally, where are you in all of these areas, and begin to set classes or structures and conversations around the rising to that place. So we don't have a bunch of people who have won the lottery and won $1 million and it's gone in 3 years.
Can I quickly jump in real quick and just say this? I have been saying probably all night, Sister Sherry, Reverend Sherry, I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon.
You have been saying it all night, but she our sister tonight. So that's how I took it. That's how I interpreted it. I didn't take it as offense, and I don't believe she did either. But she's just our sister. You're our brother tonight. She's our sister tonight. That Sherry, were you offended?
No, not at all. Not at all.
We're just brothers and sisters tonight. Absolutely. Dr. Pulley?
Yes.
Before I close, what's next, sir?
What's next is next week. Join us next week for this conversation.
I know my part. What's next, sir? I know my part.
Next week is what's next. That we gotta keep talking. We gotta keep having these conversations. We gotta keep exposing. I think that was the word Katrina said. We gotta keep exposing. We gotta keep using whatever influence we have with a child, on our jobs, in our communities, in our churches, in our relationships with our, keep using our influence to lift the consciousness of the people that we are around. Go ye into all the world means go into all of your world, every facet, every aspect of your life, and preach this good news and expose any of the bad news so that we can keep lifting each other up. And so I believe that we all have power and influence. We got to use it right where we are. Use it to have this conversation that Black lives are equal, that we are not just, that we more than matter, that we are equal. And I see myself as equal. I think that Sherry said that I see myself as equal. I desire equal rights and equal, what was that last equal that you gave, Reverend Sherry?
I don't remember exactly, but just give me all that's due to me.
It was 3 different ways that she said.
She don't want equal. She wants greater than.
And she said, I saw myself. She said, I see myself as equal. I see myself as equal. I desire equal rights. I think it was equal economics that she said.
Yeah,
but
it's that I require participating in this society at the full level, not not short. And so there's a lot of dismantling that may need to happen in the housing industry, in the banking industry, in other areas where we have been shut out and the structures are there, meaning that the same house in a Black neighborhood doesn't even accrue in value. And those are things that get passed down. Your generational wealth is real simple. You have something left over at the end of your life to pass down. And if your house is not paid for because you've been taxed all your life in different ways, not just through taxes, but like the Black taxes that we experience all through our lives, and you get to the end of your life and there's nothing left over, and you leave someone with a house with taxes on it, and then they don't have the resources to bring it current, it's like that has to be rectified. Amen. That has to be turned around. And those are systemic things that are not just, oh, I discriminated against you, I don't like you, I don't like the way your hair looks, or something like that.
And real quick, I know we're almost over time. Real quick, a difference. I think that what she's really talking about is not equality, but equity. And there's a difference there, because you can't give me generational oppression and then just all of a sudden treat me equal. No, you first have to fix what you messed up. And that requires a little extra on top of, so don't treat me as equal. I gotta be better than a little while you lift me back up so that I can actually, the playing field can't be equal until you have poured extra into me to get me back to that equal place. And then we can be equal. So before we get equality, we have to get equity.
I think somebody
Oh, he always dropping these nuggets and then we can't get into it. We're going to have him back. We're going to have him back because he'd dropped all these nuggets and then we can't even, we can't do nothing with it.
That's where you go. Come back. Okay, there you go. All right.
I'm
so
back.
In closing, I have 2 questions, and then I'll do my closing commercial. Question number 1 to each of you. Number 1, calendar permitting, will you come back? Sherry.
Yes. Are you kidding?
You here for it? You here for it?
Yes.
Romel, will you come back?
I'd be honored to, yes.
Katrina, will you come back?
Yes.
All right. The second thing, again, give the people what they want. Will you all work? Can we work together as a collective consciousness to build, to put together something for the people, an action plan for the people, components for the people? The first thing, write a letter. Some people wouldn't know where to begin with the letter, and so are you willing to work with me? Can we work together?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I want to work on the money.
Okay. And so that's my closing question. That's awesome. So Dr. Pulley said, we were 3/5 as slaves. The civil rights movement took us to 4/5. So Sherry, all right. So what gives you your additional 1/5? Is it money?
Well, it's not just the money, right? Because money is just a result, right? So really what gives me my joy is helping people develop the consciousness to have. Because if I teach you how to fish, right? If I teach you how to fish, then I take myself out of the equation. So I'm interested in people having the resources that they need, because the truth is that in consciousness, Tulsa could happen and then there not be a rebuilding, because there's one thing to generate the money, it's another thing to hold on to the money. And it's another thing to look at the power structures and see where the holes are, so that should somebody come in and drop bombs, let's just say, that you have your money so shored up and so put together that you can drop whatever bomb you want to, because my consciousness is such that my money will find my way back to me. And so there is some growing on our part to have true wealth, where it's a wealth on the inside, and so it must demand wealth on the outside.
Absolutely.
Got it. Katrina.
All right, Bishop Hector, we are way over.
Okay, so you want to close it now?
Yeah, we gotta bring it in. Yeah.
All right. I was going to do your thing, but that's fine. Go ahead and close.
No, go ahead with the closing for next week.
The bishop says close, I close. Go ahead, go.
All right, I want you to close with the closing with the show for next week.
Uh-huh. All right, go ahead. Can you see it? Dr. Pulley?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
So we invite people to come back next week for this Kingdom conversation of Black Lives Matter versus Black Lives Are Equal, for part 2. And we just take a moment to center ourselves in the presence of God, to be able to take a deep, conscious, cleansing breath, to hold it and to release, to breathe in again, to hold it and to let it go. To inhale, to hold it, and to release. It is in the name and through the power and in the consciousness of Christ Jesus, that it is so, and so it is, and so we let it be. Amen and amen.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Dr. Pulley, we get to close?
Yeah, thank everyone for joining us. Thank all of our panelists. Thank you so much for being a part of this Kingdom Conversation. Thank you for agreeing to participate and keep the conversation going. We are so grateful. Thank you, Reverend Sherry James. Thank you so much, Pastor Ramel. Thank you so much, Deacon-elect Katrina. Thank you so much, Bishop Avenard Hector, for being our moderator. We're grateful for all of you. Thank you for all those that watched us on Facebook Live. We appreciate you, and let's keep the conversation going.